Welcome to Masterclass 5, which is about identifying, assessing and supporting family carers in palliative and end-of-life care. The Masterclass has been funded by NHS England and NHS Improvement to support the Quality and Outcomes Framework for Quality Improvement in End-of-Life Care. The Masterclass also supports the Royal College of General Practitioners and Marie Curie Daffodil Standard 3 on carer support. My name is Grande, and my colleague Dr. Gail Ewing and I have developed this masterclass and will be presenting it to you. This masterclass focuses on informal carers because they play a major role in supporting patients who are at end of life. An important part of end-of-life care is therefore about supporting carers in their caregiving role. The learning objectives for Masterclass 5 are as follows. To understand the context of carers and why supporting them is important, which we cover in this module, Module 1. Next, we identify practice processes for identifying carers of people who have advanced serious illness, which is covered in Module 2. Thirdly, this is to consider practice processes that better enable carers' needs to be assessed and addressed, which is in Module 3. Finally, the aim is to learn about the Carer Support Needs Assessment Tool, or CESNAT intervention, as a comprehensive, person-centred approach to carer assessment and support, which is Module 4. In the remainder of this presentation, we shall take you through Module 1, to understand the context of carers. In this first module of the Masterclass, we cover some background context, namely why carers are so important and the impact of caregiving on them. And then we briefly cover some policy background and the questions policy leaves unanswered. And finally, we outline the learning content of the next modules to begin to address these questions. But first, let us start with a definition. The definition of carers that we use here was adopted by NICE. That says carers who may or may not be family members are lay people in a close supportive role who share in the illness experience of the patient and who undertake vital care work and emotion management. To start with, we will give a bit of background to why it is important to support carers and how to support them by looking at the importance of carers, the impact of caregiving, and what support do carers need. Let us consider the importance of carers first. There are an estimated 500,000 carers who provide care in the last year of life in the UK per annum. This figure probably underestimates the contribution of the wider network of relatives and friends. The majority of patients prefer to remain at home towards the end of life if possible. Carers are crucial in enabling end-of-life care and death to happen at home, and remaining at home is more likely for patients who have some form of informal carer support. Conversely, a considerable proportion of terminal inpatient admissions that can be classified as inappropriate or avoidable are family-initiated when family feel unable to cope. Caregiving commitments can be intense. We did a national survey with 1,504 carers of people who died from cancer. We found that on average carers provide 69.5 hours of care per week in the patient's last 3 months. That is nearly 10 hours per day, 7 days a week. And that is an average. Many provide more than this. In our national survey, carers told us that they provide help with a very wide range of tasks to support the patient's care and well-being. This can range from social and emotional support and keeping an eye on things, through everyday household tasks, shopping, preparing food and drink, and administration, to organising and attending patient appointments and travelling with the patient, helping with symptoms, and providing personal care. Carers essentially cover whatever is needed to support the patient, and many undertake quite complex tasks for which they have no training, including personal care and help with symptoms. Although caregiving can be rewarding, the level of caregiving provided by end-of-life carers can take a considerable toll. End-of-life caregiving has been found to have negative impact on carers in terms of their psychological health, their physical health, even mortality. It entails social and relationship challenges, financial and occupational difficulties, activity restrictions, it affects their quality of life, and bereavement outcomes. Although all of these are important, the biggest impact on carers is on their psychological health. Coming back to our national survey of carers of people who died from cancer, we found that during caregiving in the patient's final months of life, carers were 5 to 7 times more likely to suffer from clinically significant psychological morbidity than the general population. 83% of carers had clinically significant psychological morbidity, compared with 15% of the general population. So how may practitioners help improve things? One important factor contributing to negative impacts on carers is lack of preparedness. Many carers come to the huge task of looking after someone who is dying completely unprepared. As one carer put it to us in one of our focus groups, "It's a problem for us. None of us have ever been there before, and we don't know what we don't know. It's a huge gap." Clear relationships have been shown between lack of preparedness for caregiving and carers' fear, anxiety and stress. Carers often learn through stressful trial and error, whereas their preference would be for guided learning to help them. This provides clear pointers for areas where practitioners can make a real difference, something we will come back to later on. More generally, it has been shown that support for carers makes a difference to carer outcomes. Impact of caregiving can be mitigated through early service support and addressing carer support needs. In contrast, a lack of support is related to worse carer burden, distress and quality of life, and to worse psychological outcomes in bereavement. So what support do carers need during caregiving? Working with carers over a number of years, we have found that they need support with 2 different roles. They need support to enable them to support the patient in their role as co-workers. But they also need support to look after their own health and well-being in their role as clients in their own right. Their roles, both as co-workers and clients, reflect the fact that they are crucial contributors to end-of-life care, but also the fact that they can suffer considerable impacts from caregiving that we talked about earlier. The roles as co-worker and client are 2 quite different roles that need different input from practitioners, but both need to be covered to truly look after carers' support needs. So what types of support do carers need in their role as co-workers or as clients? To enable them to support the patient as co-workers, carers need support within 7 broad domains. They need to know who to contact if concerned. They need to understand the patient's illness and know what to expect in the future. They need to know about managing symptoms, including medicines, and help talking to the patient about their illness. They also need equipment to help care for the patient and help with providing personal care for the patient. Much of the support needed here is about information, advice, reassurance and upskilling and training, and being shown how to do things. This includes improving carers' preparedness for caregiving, which we mentioned earlier. To help carers look after their own well-being as clients, on the other hand, they need more direct support for themselves in terms of their own physical health concerns, dealing with their own feelings and worries and beliefs or spiritual concerns, as well as practical help in the home, financial, legal or work issues, and the respite care issues of having time for themselves in the day and an overnight break from caring. This is more direct input for their own well-being and time out and dealing with their daily lives. These broad domains of support are reflected in the Carer Support Needs Assessment tool, which we will come back to in a later module. How do we ensure carers are supported with these issues? We're going to touch very briefly on the policy context to further set the background and raise some unanswered questions to be considered. Policy and guidelines duly recognise carers as important and that they should be supported, but also leaves us with considerable gaps and questions. The end-of-life care strategy, as early as 2008, recognised carers as co-workers and highlighted that their needs should be assessed and addressed, but provided no guidelines on how assessment and support should be achieved. The Care Act of 2014 partly addresses this, in that it clarifies it is a statutory duty to provide a carer assessment. However, statutory local authority assessment covers carers in general, not particularly end of life, and really only addresses carer support needs in relation to their role as clients, so just one part of carers' roles. Furthermore, for a statutory local authority assessment, carers generally need to identify themselves as carers, and as we shall see in Module 2, carers may often not do so. For this and other reasons, many end-of-life carers never even get a statutory local authority assessment of their needs, even as clients. Now, the Ambitions for Palliative and End-of-Life Care 2015 does focus on end-of-life care, and it builds on the 2008 end-of-life care strategy. But unlike that strategy, the Ambitions framework was co-produced by a national partnership of palliative and end-of-life care organisations. However, this new framework bundles patients and carers together as the unit of care. And although it introduces the importance of being person-centred, this again does not provide guidance on how person-centeredness should be achieved or consider the particular needs of carers. More recently, there is still consideration of carers within end-of-life care, but there remains an underlying assumption that referral to statutory local authority assessment is how to deal with carer needs, or that it is sufficient to just signpost carers to services without first assessing what they actually need. However, the RCGP Marie Curie Daffodil Standards for General Practice are now picking up the need for assessing and supporting carers within general practice. And finally, it was the recognition of a policy and guideline gap in relation to carers that led the NHS England and NHS Improvement QOF Quality Improvement for End-of-Life Care to choose to focus on identifying and supporting caregivers as one of its 3 aims. Current policy leaves us with the following gaps and questions, therefore. How do we fully assess carers' needs both as co-workers and clients, including when to refer to statutory assessment? How do we support carers in a truly person-centred way? We are supposed to deliver person-centred end-of-life care, so what processes are required to enable carers to say what matters to them and ensure input is tailored to what they feel would help them? How do we ascertain carers' support needs as separate from patients, now that patients and carers are bundled together in end-of-life care guidance? And how do we implement and sustain carer support in a system that naturally is geared to focus on patients? The remaining modules of the Masterclass begin to look at how we tackle these questions to improve person-centred assessment and support for carers during end-of-life caregiving. We're going both to consider how we ensure general practice is set up and ready to implement and sustain carer assessment and support, as well as the process of carer assessment and support itself. So we will look at identification of carers, the creation of carer-ready practices, and how to achieve person-centered assessment and support. So in the next module, Module 2, we will look at who are your carers and ensuring equitable access. This considers how to consistently identify carers, gather data relevant to caregiving, and ensuring a consistent recording system for carer information. Module 3 will look at creating carer-ready practices. This module considers how to further plan for implementation of carer assessment and support, review practice goals and capacity, develop a leadership team, champion roles and pathways of communication to underpin carer assessment and support. Finally, Module 4 will look at achieving person-centered carer assessment and support. This module considers how to achieve person-centered care assessment and support using one intervention as an example, the CESNAT intervention. However, it draws out principles relevant to person-centered care assessment and support in general. We're going to look at person-centered and personalized care, its definitions and communalities. We're going to look at the protocol for assessing and supporting carers, the Carer Support Needs Assessment Tool, or the CESNAT intervention. This considers the content and stages of the protocol, their rationale, and also the principles that are translatable beyond the CESNAT intervention itself. We'll consider some key lessons learned from the CESNAT intervention research, and finally, how to get started on the CESNAT intervention, how to get ready for and accessing CESNAT intervention training for those who want to adopt this approach.